So here's a question for you. If God is good, and if God is just, then why is there so much evil in the world? This is not a new question that I'm asking you. I realize that this question has been around for a very long time, but it's an important question, and it's a question that I'd like to explore with you. It's the question of theodicy. This is the theological term that people use in order to explore this question. Theodicy comes from two Greek words, theo, meaning God, and dike, meaning justice, God's justice. And it asks the question that we just asked. Theodicy primarily breaks down into two categories. First, moral evil. Moral evil refers to the evil that humans inflict upon one another through some form of violence. Physical, verbal, emotional, the list could go on. Some form of violence that humans inflict upon one another. This is moral evil. The second category is natural evil. The evil that happens in the natural world. Evil such as the suffering that's caused from earthquakes, tsunamis, tornadoes, and the like. Fires, famines, the list can go on. So this is what theodicy is trying to get at. If God is good and just, how can there be so much evil in the world? So in these two videos, I'd like to explore with you this issue. This first video will be about moral evil, and the second will be about natural evil. So when it comes to moral evil, I think that mimetic anthropology has a lot to offer our understanding about this theodicy issue. Basically what mimetic anthropology states is that humans influence one another to desire certain things. It's as if we borrow these desires from one another, kind of in a non-conscious imitative way. And you can see this amongst you and your friends, I'm sure. You and your friends have a lot of things in common. This is why your friendship works. You share common desires. And when your friends start liking something, you want to like it too, so that you have this thing in common. You can share these experiences with one another. But you can also see how this common desire can separate you, can tear you apart if you begin to compete over certain objects. This is how people who are best friends can soon become the worst enemies, because they share these things in common. And if they go after the same object of desire, their friendship can end and they can become bitter enemies. Well, this shared desire is part of what makes us human. In fact, the very early humans, the proto-humans, were going through this phase where they had these shared desires and these conflicts arose for these objects. And what ended up happening was frustration came about in the community, almost this universal frustration with one another. And it ended up finding an outlet in an individual, in a scapegoat. And so all of the frustrations were united against this common enemy, this scapegoat. And so this is how religion ended up forming. Religion was an outlet, a ritual was formed around this scapegoating incident that brought peace where there was conflict, that brought unity where there was division. And so religion was a way of bringing about temporary peace, but it always came at the expense of another. And this is how religion formed. And then there was a group of people who came around called the Jews, or the Israelites. The ancient Israelites somehow got beyond this sacrifice of human beings. You see this in Abraham when he's asked to sacrifice his son Isaac, and he doesn't. He doesn't sacrifice the human being. There is animal sacrifice, but even that gets critiqued by the prophets. Hosea has God say, "I desire mercy, not sacrifice. Knowledge of God, not sacrifice. I desire compassion and not violence." You don't need to work. You don't need to find peace through violence anymore. And this comes about ultimately in the Jew, Jesus, who quotes the prophet Hosea and says, I desire mercy, not sacrifice. He tells his disciples, go and learn what that means. I desire mercy and not sacrifice. Jesus takes this as his whole being. This statement, I desire mercy, love, compassion, not violence. This consumes Jesus so much that when a crowd that was frustrated now finds unanimity against this person, Jesus, and puts him up on a cross, kills him, Jesus doesn't retaliate, doesn't pray for revenge, but offers mercy, not violence, in return. He prays for forgiveness, says, Father, forgive them, for they know not what they do. They're caught up in this contagion of violence that they don't know what they're doing. They're just caught up in this mechanism. And Jesus, in return, offers forgiveness. Now, what does this mean for us today when we're dealing with the evil within our world? I think that the prophets, Hosea, and what's happening in early Judaism, ancient Israelite religion, where you get away from this violence inflicted upon one another, and what culminates in this person, Jesus, when all of this violence is inflicted upon him, and yet he refuses to inflict it back and offers forgiveness in return, is the answer to theodicy, where God's justice is not seen, is not with revenge, but with forgiveness. God's justice is associated with reconciliation, where God's goodness is associated not with retaliation again, but with forgiveness, with reconciliation. This, I think, is how you deal with the evil in the world. Not to retaliate in kind, but to offer mercy, compassion in return. So, that's a very difficult thing to do, I realize. But it may be the only way out of the messes that we're in. Nobody said being a Christian or a Jew or a person of faith was easy. It's demanding work. It's hard. But yeah, I think that's what we're called to do. So that's God's justice and goodness in a world that's full of evil, to offer reconciliation and forgiveness in return. So those are my thoughts on moral, evil, theodicy. Let me know what you think. Thanks.